Families are supposed to be the ones we trust the most, but sometimes the unthinkable happens. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most shocking family massacres in history. These are real stories of tragic and horrifying events that tore families apart in ways no one could have imagined. Each case reveals a nightmare that seemed impossible, yet was all too real.
A father is outraged after his daughter was billed for a guardrail that he says contributed to her death. Hannah Eimers died in a car crash last November in Tennessee.
It was November 1st, 2016, in McMinn County, Tennessee. 17-year-old Hannah Eimers was heading home after a Halloween night spent with friends. She and her friend were driving north on Interstate 75, the quiet hum of the road beneath them. But in an instant, everything changed. The car veered off the road. No one knows why. Maybe it was fatigue, maybe a brief distraction. Hannah tried to correct the wheel, but the vehicle swerved violently toward the median, straight into a guardrail. But this wasn't just any guardrail. This was a Lindsay X-Light, a design meant to save lives, a device meant to crumple on impact, to absorb the force, to slow the vehicle and protect its passengers. But that morning it didn't. Instead of collapsing, the rail acted like a spear. The steel sliced through the front of the car, punched through the driver's side, and kept going, through Hannah's head and chest, until it shoved her into the back seat. The car dragged the metal monster for nearly 20 feet before it finally stopped. Hannah died instantly. She never had a chance. Beside her, her friend sat in stunned silence, surviving with nothing more than a minor cut. Hannah wasn't just another teenager. She was the oldest of 10 in a blended family, a brilliant girl who had earned her high school diploma at 15. She was fluent in multiple languages, gifted in music and acting, and passionate about working with children with special needs. She'd even learned sign language so she could connect with them more deeply. And just like that, she was gone. Her father, Steve Eimers, an EMT who had seen more crashes than he could count, couldn't believe what had happened. A crash that should have been survivable turned into a nightmare. How could the friend walk away with a scratch while Hannah didn't? That question haunted him. But what came next made it worse. 4 months later, a letter arrived, addressed to Hannah from the Tennessee Department of Transportation. Inside was a bill for nearly $3,000, a charge for replacing the very guardrail that had killed her. Steve was stunned. How could they? They will take your life and then send you a bill, he said bitterly. But the deeper Steve dug, the more horrifying the truth became. Just a week before Hannah's crash, Tennessee had quietly removed the X-Light from its list of approved safety devices. They knew something was wrong. They knew these guardrails weren't safe at highway speeds, but over 1,000 of them still lined the state's roads, including the one that killed his daughter. Steve's search for answers uncovered even more disturbing facts. At least 19 people across the U.S. had died in crashes involving X-Lights. Time and again, the rails hadn't collapsed like they were supposed to. They hadn't saved lives. They had become deadly weapons. Grief turned Steve into a man on a mission. He traveled over 20,000 miles inspecting X-Light installations in more than 15 states. What he found horrified him. Damaged rails left unrepaired, rails installed incorrectly, rails that were accidents waiting to happen. In North Carolina alone, he checked over 200 of them, and nearly every single one had serious issues. Some states took action. Tennessee began pulling X-Lights from roads with speed limits over 45 miles per hour. But in other places, like North Carolina, more than 3,500 remained. Officials said it would cost over $20 million to replace them all. Meanwhile, lives hung in the balance. And there was another dark truth. The government had relied on private labs to test these guardrails, labs owned by the very companies that made them. The X-Light was tested and approved by a lab belonging to its own manufacturer. A 2016 federal report called this what it was, a dangerous conflict of interest. It took years, but Steve's relentless advocacy helped change that. A new rule in the 2021 infrastructure bill now demands independent testing of highway safety equipment. But for Steve, and for families like his, it came far too late.
First at 4, authorities have released new details about the horrific Monoa murders, including a possible motive. We want to warn you, a lot of what you're about to hear is disturbing.
It was March 10th, 2024, in Monoa. The Oda family lived there. Paris Oda, 46, was a respected chiropractor. His wife, Naoko, a gentle and thoughtful woman, was always kind to neighbors. Their children, 17-year-old Sakurako, 12-year-old Orion, and 10-year-old Nana, were bright and full of promise. To the outside world, they were the perfect family. Quiet, polite, engaged in school and community events. Nothing ever seemed out of place, but inside that home, a storm had been brewing for years. Paris had been crumbling under a weight that no one saw. He was drowning in debt, tax bills he couldn't pay, legal threats, quiet notices. His chiropractic practice, once successful, had been slowly bleeding money. He owed back rent on his office, and every attempt to climb out of the hole had only pulled him in deeper. He sold his car. Household items disappeared. He even drove for Uber in secret to bring in a few extra dollars. Still, the walls kept closing in. That morning, just after 8:30 a.m., neighbors reported hearing shouting inside the Oda home. Then came a second call, this time from the woman renting the downstairs unit. Her voice shook as she spoke to dispatch. She'd heard cries, struggles. Something was terribly wrong. She locked herself in her room, trembling. Then she noticed something that turned her blood cold. Blood seeping under her door. When police returned, the house was eerily silent. The front door was locked. They circled to the back and entered, only to be met with a scene so devastating. Officers would later describe it as one of the worst in recent memory. Paris was found first, lying in the hallway, lifeless. His injuries were clear and brutal. As they moved through the home, they found Naoko, then Sakurako, Orion, little Nana, all gone. Each showed signs of struggle, as if they had fought, begged, or tried to run. It was too much to process. How could this have happened? The news swept through Honolulu like a black wave. A family was gone. The Odas weren't strangers. People had seen them at the park, in the grocery store, at school events. A neighbor named Wakai stood at the edge of the police tape, eyes red, voice cracking. "This is a quiet place. Things like this don't happen here." But they had. Investigators began piecing the story together. Paris's background revealed a trail of financial ruin. From 2017 to 2021, he'd been sued for unpaid rent. Despite receiving a pandemic relief loan, he never recovered. The debt kept mounting. By January, he was selling property. By February, he finally admitted to Naoko how deep the tax problems really were. The IRS, the courts, the unpaid debts, it was all crashing down. They discussed fleeing to Japan, maybe starting over. But Paris didn't believe escape was possible. In one heartbreaking message, he said he felt trapped and doubted anyone could care for his family the way he could. Those messages became cries in hindsight, clues of a mind spiraling into a dark place. In his final weeks, Paris had even asked someone about how to obtain a firearm. He never followed through, but the thought was there, the intent, the fear, the need for an exit, the belief that no help could fix this. And then March 10th arrived. Authorities now believed the tragedy was premeditated, a desperate act rooted not in hatred, but in a twisted, suffocating love. Paris had convinced himself that ending it all was the only solution, that if he couldn't provide, if he couldn't protect, then no one else should be allowed to try. He believed he was sparing them from a worse fate, but he was wrong.
A rising reality star's tragic accident has left family and fans reeling tonight. A vibrant fitness expert known for living life to the fullest killed by an oncoming train while filming.
In January 2015, fitness model and actor George Gregory Plitt Jr., better known as Greg Plitt, was no stranger to daring videos. The 37-year-old lived fearlessly, a trait that shone through in the content he created for his fans. But on January 17th, what began as just another shoot ended in heartbreaking tragedy, leaving family, friends, and followers in shock. Greg Plitt was larger than life, inspiring millions with his incredible physique, unshakable discipline, and boundless energy. A West Point graduate and former Army Ranger, he had served his country for 5 years, a testament to his dedication and strength. His military service shaped him into a man who embraced challenge, and that confidence became a defining part of who he was. After leaving the Army, Plitt built a career in fitness and modeling, appearing on more than 250 fitness magazine covers and becoming one of the most recognizable figures in the industry. He wasn't just a model, He was an actor too, with roles on Bravo's Workout and NBC's Days of Our Lives. His powerful physique even inspired the look of Dr. Manhattan in the 2009 film Watchmen. Fans admired him for his relentless work ethic, and Plitt was always ready to motivate, pushing himself and others to new heights. But that same drive to push the limits would ultimately lead to disaster. On January 17, 2015, Plitt and 2 crew members set up on railroad tracks in Burbank, California, to film a promotional video for an energy drink. It wasn't the first time he'd filmed there. In the past, Plitt had shot videos of himself working out on the tracks as trains passed by in the background. This time, though, things went horribly wrong. Plitt started running alongside the tracks, focused on getting the perfect shot, seemingly unaware that a southbound Metrolink commuter train was approaching from behind. A man who had jumped from planes over 1,000 times, who had scaled cliffs and lived for adrenaline, Plitt was no stranger to risk. But this time, his confidence led to a fatal mistake. When the train's horn blared, Plitt and his team may have believed it was on a parallel track. He kept running, convinced he was safe, but he wasn't. He was directly in the path of the train. In a split second, what had been a high-energy shoot turned into a nightmare. Plitt tried to escape at the last moment, but it was too late. The engineer hit the emergency brakes, but the train couldn't stop in time. It struck Plitt, killing him almost instantly. The horrifying moment was captured on the train's onboard cameras. In the aftermath, those closest to Plitt struggled to understand how such a vibrant, determined man could be lost so suddenly. His girlfriend, Christina Steichel, described through tears how he had been trying to get the best shot, a reflection of the intense passion that fueled everything he did. His death was ruled a tragic accident. Investigators revealed that the shoot had taken place without permits or safety measures, on a section of track where no one had permission to be. The tragedy raised painful questions about why such dangerous risks had been taken without precautions. Greg Plitt's life, filled with adventure and achievement, ended in a moment of misjudgment. His story remains a sobering reminder of how even the strongest, most experienced people can fall victim to the dangers of pushing too far in the pursuit of greatness.
All of the teens died from their injuries. An OHP report says the driver was 16 years old. As for the passengers, 2 of them were 17, and the other 3 only 15.
It was March 22nd, 2022 in Tishomingo, Oklahoma, a town of just over 3,000 people where everyone knows everyone. That afternoon, 6 teenage girls, Gracie Machado, Brooklyn Triplett, Austin Holt, Madison Robertson, Addison Gratz, and Memory Wilson piled into a small 2015 Chevy Spark during their lunch break. They were close friends, full of laughter, packed together into that little car, heading out for what should have been an ordinary, carefree ride. But they never came back. Shortly after noon, their car approached a spot locals simply called the Y, a Y-shaped intersection where State Highway 22 meets US 377. It's a confusing, dangerous stretch of road with a sharp curve and poor visibility. People had warned about it for years. That day, the warnings would come tragically true. The Chevy Spark came to a stop at the sign, then began to pull out onto US 377. At that exact moment, a massive rock-hauling semi barreled down the highway. Behind the wheel was Valendon Burton, a 51-year-old grandfather and volunteer firefighter. There was no time, no chance. The truck slammed into the side of the small car, crushing it and pushing it nearly 300 feet down the road. The force of the impact was devastating. The Chevy Spark, designed for 4, had 6 inside. Only 2 of them, the front seat passengers, wore seatbelts. When first responders arrived, the scene was heartbreaking. The car was torn apart, barely recognizable. The bright pink steering wheel cover was still visible amid the twisted wreckage, a gut-wrenching reminder of how young they were. 4 of the girls, including the 16-year-old driver, died at the scene. The other 2 clung to life for a few moments longer but passed away shortly after reaching the hospital. All of them gone. Just like that. They were between 15 and 17 years old, with dreams and futures that would never be. Gracie Machado, her sister, later shared a photo of the 2 hugging, posting nothing but a broken heart emoji. Brooklyn Triplett, the cheerleader, the softball player, the loyal friend who always had your back. Austin Holt, bright, spirited, a member of Future Farmers of America who loved showing her prize hogs. Madison Robertson, a beautiful soul, her family called her, full of kindness. Addison Gratz, AJ, adored by her grandfather, who said a piece of his heart was gone forever. Memory Wilson, a young mother who somehow always found time for her little girl, no matter how busy life got. The truck driver, who had been wearing his seatbelt, survived without injury. He hadn't done anything wrong. No charges were filed. The investigation continued, but in truth, there wasn't much mystery, just unbearable sorrow. Experts pointed to familiar dangers: too many passengers, too few seatbelts. Research shows that the risk of a deadly crash skyrockets with each underage passenger in the car. And in Oklahoma, backseat passengers over 7 don't even have to wear a seatbelt. Maybe if they had. Maybe if the laws were stricter. Maybe. Tributes flooded social media, photos, memories, prayers. But amid the love, there were cruel comments too. People judging, pointing fingers about the seatbelts, about choices no one could take back. The families, already shattered, now forced to defend the girls they lost. It was July 2021, and Albert Dand was on another one of his adventures. At 22 years old, Albert was a beloved Danish YouTuber known for his fun personality and creative content. That July, his work had brought him to the Italian Alps, where he planned to film a video for his channel on the K Mountain. But Albert never got to shoot his video. Instead, a devastating accident claimed his life. Albert's rise to prominence began in 2016 when he joined YouTube and started sharing a range of content, from comedy sketches to music videos. Over the years, he amassed a large following, with more than 170,000 subscribers on YouTube and over 230,000 followers on Instagram. His energetic and often unconventional approach to entertainment resonated with viewers who were drawn to his humor, creativity, and adventurous spirit. In 2018, he even ventured into acting, starring in the comedy film Team Albert, a story about a high schooler's quest to become a YouTube sensation. The film was well received and won the Blockbuster Audience Award at the Danish Film Awards in 2019, further solidifying Albert's place in the Danish entertainment industry. Despite his lighthearted content, Albert was known to push the boundaries in his videos, often involving stunts and risk-taking. Some of his content stirred controversy for its daring nature, including moments where he shaved his head or licked snails for the camera. But these antics were part of what made him popular among a younger audience seeking bold, unapologetic entertainment. His work reflected his playful yet fearless attitude towards life, a trait that endeared him to many. Fans adored his willingness to take risks, but sadly, the same daring nature led to the accident that claimed his life. On July 28, 2021, Albert was filming in the Italian Alps, specifically on Mount Cicada in Val Gardena, a region known for its dramatic cliffs and towering peaks. Accompanied by friends, he was attempting to capture footage for his channel on a hiking route with steep, rocky slopes. As he filmed on the mountain, something went wrong. Maybe it was because of inattention, or maybe it was because of recklessness. He was filming on a hiking trail that links 2 mountain peaks, a trail that was steep, deep, and rocky. In an instant, the unimaginable happened. Albert stumbled and fell from a staggering height of 656 feet. His friends immediately alerted the authorities, and a rescue helicopter was dispatched instantly. But the rescue operation was complicated by difficult conditions, including dense fog. When rescuers finally reached Albert, he was pronounced dead at the scene. According to reports, his death occurred in a matter of seconds. Friends, fellow creators, and fans expressed their grief online. Many tributes poured in for the young YouTuber, with Danish social media personalities sharing heartfelt messages in his honor. As those who knew him mourned his passing, they also celebrated the joy he brought into the lives of many. Albert Dand's memory lives on through his videos, a lasting testament to his creativity as well as his humor.
Press and the public.
Excuse me a minute.
But their anguish was an act.
It was the early hours of May 11th, 2012, on Victory Road in Derby, England. A fire had erupted inside the Philpot family's modest home. Inside, 6 children, Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, Jaden, and Duane, were trapped. To the world, Michael Philpot looked like a father in agony. He stood outside, seemingly broken, as the fire brigade recovered the lifeless bodies of his children. Cameras caught his face, twisted with what appeared to be grief, but beneath that performance was something colder, something calculated. At first, the fire seemed like a tragic accident, an unthinkable loss, but as investigators began to dig deeper, the story began to unravel, and what they uncovered was horrifying. Michael, then 56, was no stranger to attention. He had made headlines before, not for heroism, but for the bizarre life he led. He shared his home not just with his wife, Mered, but also with his former lover, Lisa Willis. It was a chaotic, tangled arrangement. He had fathered 10 children between the two women, and their cramped council house had become notorious throughout Derby. The public had already taken notice of Michael. He had appeared on television programs, including The Jeremy Kyle Show, flaunting his unconventional lifestyle and unapologetic reliance on government benefits. His arrogance was on full display. The media branded the household as shameless, but Michael seemed to revel in the controversy, soaking up the attention like fuel to his ego. Then, everything changed. Lisa Willis left him. In February of that year, she took her children and vanished from the household under the guise of a routine outing, and never came back. For Michael, it wasn't just rejection, it was betrayal. He saw her departure as a loss of control, and Michael Philpot did not let go of control easily. He began obsessively trying to bring her back, texting, calling, pleading, manipulating. But when none of it worked, his mind twisted into something even darker. Authorities later alleged that Michael devised a plan to set fire to his own home, not to hurt his children, but to save them. At least, that's what he intended. He wanted to be seen as a heroic father who had rescued his children from a fire, framing Lisa as a jealous ex who had tried to destroy him. In his mind, that performance would win public sympathy and maybe even custody of Lisa's children. But his plan was as reckless as it was evil. On the night of the fire, Michael, Mered, and a family friend named Paul Mosley poured gasoline inside the house. They lit the match. They staged the emergency. Mered called 999, her voice frantic, but it wasn't real panic. It was rehearsed, a setup, except something went horribly wrong. The fire spread too fast. The smoke suffocated the rooms. The children, who should have been saved in a dramatic rescue, were instead burned alive in their beds. Outside, neighbors risked everything to try and help. Some broke windows, others ran into the choking black smoke. Firefighters arrived, only to find silence inside. No cries, no footsteps, just 6 lifeless bodies. In the days that followed, something about Michael didn't sit right. His grief seemed shallow, almost performative. When he held a press conference with Mered by his side, his demeanor shocked the public. He barely shed a tear. He thanked the community with strange detachment. Something was off. Detectives noticed, too. They placed Michael, Mered, and Mosley under surveillance, hiding recording devices in their hotel room. What those devices captured was damning. Not only was there no sorrow, there were rehearsals. Michael coached the others on what to say. They discussed the fire, the aftermath, their version of events. It was clear this wasn't grief. This was damage control. Then came Michael's past, a history of violence, control, and emotional abuse. In 1978, he had stabbed an ex-girlfriend multiple times when she left him. Lisa Willis later told the court that he had subjected her to relentless manipulation, threats, and fear. He wasn't a grieving father. He was a man who had treated women and children like pieces on a board, moving them to suit his desires. The trial was long and painful. The courtroom filled with the haunting faces of those who had lost everything. The jury listened to the recordings. They heard the testimony after testimony about Michael's obsessive need for control, his violent temper, his need to be seen as the victim, always. In the end, justice came, but for many, it felt hollow. Michael Philpot was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 15 years. Mered and Mosley each received 17 years, with the possibility of release halfway through. That possibility became reality when Mered walked free after serving just over half her sentence.
It was July 16, 2003 in Santa Monica, California. Arizona Avenue had been transformed into a lively farmer's market. A sea of colorful produce stands and cheerful chatter. Families strolled between vendors, children tugged at their parents' hands, and elderly couples soaked in the sunshine. Around 9,000 people were expected that day. The street was closed to traffic, creating what felt like a safe, peaceful space. But that peace shattered in an instant. At about 1:47 p.m., 86-year-old George Russell Weller was behind the wheel of his 1992 Buick LeSabre, heading west on Arizona Avenue. As he neared the barricaded market, something went horribly wrong. His car struck a Mercedes-Benz waiting at a crosswalk, but instead of stopping, Weller's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. Witnesses watched in disbelief as the Buick veered around the barricades and roared into the crowd. The massive car became a weapon, barreling through the heart of the market at terrifying speed. 40, 60, maybe even 70 miles per hour, covering nearly 1,000 feet in just seconds. Stalls splintered like matchsticks. Tables were flattened. Produce, bags, shoes, and bodies were thrown into the air. Some described it as watching a tank tear through the street. The chaos was beyond comprehension. People screamed. Some ran. Others froze, trapped in the path of destruction. A small blue stroller stood abandoned at the curb, stained with blood. The stroller of a 3-year-old girl who didn't survive. Bodies lay where they fell. Red blankets covered the injured. Yellow tarps hid the dead. A red Buick sat at the center of the wreckage. Windshield shattered, metal crumpled. Weller's car finally stopped after a pedestrian landed on his windshield, blocking his view. A nearby bicycle officer rushed in and pulled Weller from the car. Witnesses said the elderly man looked lost, confused, like he didn't understand what had just happened. Some thought he seemed frightened. Others swore he was oddly calm, even hugging people after leaving the station later that day. When the dust settled, the toll was unimaginable. 10 lives lost, including the little girl in the stroller. More than 70 people injured, some forever changed. Melissa Cronin was one of them. Thrown to the ground, her pelvis shattered, spleen damaged, head injured. She would later write that even years afterward, her body would tense and her heart would race any time she stepped into a crowd. Emergency crews worked desperately, lifting Weller's car off survivors with the help of bystanders. News helicopters hovered above, capturing the grim scene. The destruction, the heartbreak, the stunned faces of those who had witnessed the unimaginable. Weller was taken to the hospital. Tests showed no alcohol, no drugs. He told investigators he'd hit the gas instead of the brake and panicked when he realized his mistake. His lawyer issued a statement. The family was devastated, deeply sorry. But the damage was done, and the sorrow rippled through the city. There were no immediate arrests. Police said Weller posed no flight risk. He walked with a cane. Investigators combed through his medical records, examined the Buick, looked for anything that might explain what went so wrong. There was no mechanical failure, no clear warning, just one terrible error that cost so many lives. The lawsuits came, more than 30 in total. By 2008, Santa Monica had paid $21 million to victims and families, and while Weller was never criminally charged, many were left asking how a man his age, with declining abilities, still held a license. The city installed stronger barriers at the market, $219,000 worth of reinforced protection, too late for those lost. A warning from a police officer 3 years earlier about the market's vulnerabilities had gone unheeded. The price of that delay was now clear. George Weller spent his final years under full-time care, passing away in 2010 at age 94. The crash wasn't an act of malice, but for the families who lost mothers, fathers, children, for the survivors who still carry the scars, the consequences were permanent.
Now to a developing story. We have an update to the quad murder-suicide that took place yesterday in Oklahoma City.
It was the morning of April 22, 2024, in Yukon, Oklahoma. The Candy family lived there. Jonathan, 42, known for his humor. Lindsay, 39, the heart of the home. Their 4 sons, Dylan, 18, nearing graduation. Ethan, 14, a passionate baseball player. Lucas, 12, gentle and sweet, and their youngest, just 10, whose name has been kept private. They were the family everyone admired, present, cheerful, close-knit. But at 9:35 a.m., a trembling child's voice cut through the calm. "Something's wrong," the youngest son said to the 911 dispatcher. Police arrived to find the home undisturbed on the outside, but inside, the scene was horrifying. Jonathan, Lindsay, Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas, all gone. A firearm lay near Jonathan's body. Authorities believed he had killed his wife and 3 older sons before turning the gun on himself. But the youngest survived. Why? Investigators could only guess. Perhaps it was the closed bedroom door, or the fan muffling sound. Maybe he simply slept through it. Or maybe Jonathan made a choice, a decision no one can explain. The boy remembered hearing the fire alarm during the night but went back to sleep, unaware that his world was shattering just feet away. By morning, The silence in the house told him something was wrong. What he discovered was a nightmare no child should ever face. The community was stunned. There were no warning signs, no police calls, no history of violence. The Candys seemed loving and stable. Lindsay's family was heartbroken, choosing to remember her and the boys while separating themselves from Jonathan's final act. Tributes poured in. Dylan, the bright senior with big dreams. Ethan, whose teammates wore black armbands in his honor. Lucas, remembered for his kindness. Social media was filled with grief and disbelief. The surviving boy was taken in by relatives. His aunt said he was safe and loved, but acknowledged the emotional wounds were deep. A GoFundMe was launched to support him. Therapy, education, healing. Still, the question lingered. Why did Jonathan do it? Police found no answers, no note, no motive, no history that pointed to what unfolded that night. Sergeant Gary Knight admitted, "We may never know. Was the boy's survival luck or intention? No one can say for sure." The Candy family later released a statement raw with grief. "We are heartbroken and left with so many unanswered questions. Please hold your loved ones close." And people did. The tragedy echoed far beyond Mirage Street. It became a haunting reminder that even the happiest families can be hiding pain no one sees. That darkness can dwell behind any door, but one light remains. A 10-year-old boy, alone but alive, scarred but not forgotten, a quiet survivor of a family that once was whole, and his story is still being written.
Prank gone wrong. A man shot someone during what police are calling a fake robbery. They say it was all for YouTube video.
February 5th, 2021, was supposed to be a typical evening at Urban Air Adventure Park in Nashville. The venue, known for family-friendly fun, was filled with people enjoying themselves, unaware that tragedy was about to strike in a way no one could have predicted. That night would spark heated debate about social media responsibility and the thin, dangerous line between entertainment and real danger. Timothy Wilkes was a soft-spoken, responsible 20-year-old. He had worked at Walmart for several years and was attending school to pursue a career in HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. But alongside his steady ambitions, Timothy harbored another passion, YouTube. On that fateful February night, he set out with a friend to film a video, part of a growing trend of prank content that often pushes the limits of what's funny and what's frightening. Their idea was to stage a fake robbery, hoping to capture the startled reactions of strangers on camera, a concept that had gained millions of views across the platform. They chose the parking lot of Urban Air as the backdrop, with families inside enjoying the attractions, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding just outside. As Timothy and his friend approached a group of people, carrying butcher knives meant to sell the illusion, the prank took a terrifying turn. The knives were not props. They were real, sharp, and terrifying to anyone on the receiving end. What was meant as a prank looked and felt exactly like an armed robbery. Among the group was 23-year-old David Starnes Jr., who had no idea what was really happening. Faced with what he believed was a real threat to his life and the lives of others, Starnes drew his gun and fired, killing Timothy on the spot. When police arrived, Starnes immediately explained that he had acted in self-defense. He had no way of knowing it was a staged prank. Witnesses confirmed that Timothy and his friend had been filming for a YouTube video. The authorities, after investigating, chose not to file charges against Starnes, ruling that he acted to protect himself and those around him. Timothy's death shattered his family. His grandmother, Shirley Berry, spoke out in grief, describing the pain of losing her grandson and her confusion over how it had all happened. She had no idea Timothy was filming YouTube pranks, and the news came as a devastating shock. Through her heartbreak, she urged other families to stay aware of what their children are doing online. She hoped that Timothy's story would serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the pursuit of online fame can have deadly consequences. What happened that night was the result of poor judgment, fear, and a tragic misunderstanding. A young man with so much ahead of him was gone in an instant, and another would forever carry the weight of having taken a life, even in self-defense. Timothy Wilkes is remembered as a respectful, serious young man, a role model to his younger siblings, whose life ended far too soon.
Days after a man dressed as Santa Claus murdered 9 people at his ex-in-law's Christmas party, comes word he may have even planned for more victims.
It was Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2008, in Covina, California. Joseph Papa Joe Ortega and his wife Alicia were hosting their annual holiday gathering. Around 11:30 p.m., as the festivities began to wind down and guests settled into the calm of the evening, there was an unexpected knock at the door. 8-year-old Katrina, full of curiosity and still buzzing from the excitement of the night, opened it. Standing there was a man dressed as Santa Claus, holding what looked like Christmas presents. For a moment, it seemed magical, like a fairy tale coming to life. But that illusion shattered in an instant. It wasn't Santa, it was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo. Bruce wasn't a stranger to the family. He was Sylvia Ortega's ex-husband, and Sylvia was inside the house that night. Their divorce had been finalized just days earlier, and Bruce was seething with rage. The courts had ordered him to pay Sylvia $10,000, a sum he resented deeply. He was furious over what he believed were frivolous expenses on her part. Even the loss of his beloved dog during the settlement gnawed at him. But no one, not even those closest to him, knew how deeply his bitterness had festered, how far he was willing to go. Beneath the red suit and beard, Bruce was armed. Hidden inside those gifts were weapons and a homemade flamethrower. Without hesitation, he pulled out a gun and shot Katrina, the innocent little girl who had opened the door. Chaos erupted. Screams echoed through the house. People dove for cover, trying to shield children, hide under tables, and run for their lives. James Ortega was among the first to be hit. Charles Ortega shouted, "It's Bruce!" his voice filled with desperation, as he tried to warn the others just before being gunned down. One by one, Bruce targeted his former in-laws methodically and mercilessly. The joyful home transformed into a war zone. Leticia Ortega, Katrina's mother, found the strength to act. Through the smoke and gunfire, she led several children out of the house, risking her life to save theirs. But Bruce wasn't finished. As the terrified survivors scattered, he unleashed his final act of destruction. He poured gasoline across the home and ignited it using his flamethrower. The fire raged violently, climbing over 50 feet into the night sky. Neighbors, stunned by the explosions and cries for help, called 911. By the time firefighters were able to bring the blaze under control, an hour and a half later, the home was gone. 9 family members were dead. Some were burned so badly that only dental records could confirm their identities. Among the victims were Papa Joe and Alicia, their sons James and Charles, daughter-in-law Teresa, granddaughter Sylvia, grandson Michael, and Charles's wife Sherry. Many had died in the very room where just moments earlier they had been laughing, eating, and exchanging gifts. Only 3 people survived the massacre. Katrina, though shot, clung to life. A 16-year-old girl had been struck while fleeing, and a 20-year-old woman managed to escape by jumping from a second-story window, breaking her ankle on impact. Their survival was miraculous, but it came at an unimaginable cost. Bruce fled the scene, driving nearly 40 miles to his brother's house. His plan to vanish unraveled quickly. His Santa suit had melted into his skin from the flames, leaving him with excruciating burns. Sometime in the early hours of Christmas morning, he ended his life with a single gunshot. Outside, police discovered his car packed with explosives, rigged to detonate. Inside the vehicle, they found cash taped to his legs and an airline ticket to Illinois, proof that he had planned to disappear. But fate had other plans.
The accident was at a well-known danger spot. In the French countryside, there are more and more big vehicles, too often traveling at speed.
It was October 23, 2015 in southwestern France. A group of retirees from the tiny village of Petit-Palais-et-Cournon had set off on what was meant to be a peaceful day trip. These were neighbors, friends, couples who had shared countless outings together, now packed onto a bus, ready to enjoy the golden vineyards near Saint-Emilion. The bus glided along a narrow forested road. Coming from the opposite direction, a logging truck appeared, navigating the same tight bend. At the wheel was 30-year-old Cyril Alexandre, his 3-year-old son sitting beside him. The truck was heavy. Its load was a dangerous mix of timber and a large external tank of gasoline for chainsaws. As the truck rounded the bend, something went wrong. Maybe the weight shifted. Maybe the curve was too sharp. Cyril lost control. In a terrifying instant, the truck jackknifed across the road, skidding straight into the path of the bus. The impact was deafening. Metal crushed against metal. The truck's fuel tank burst, spilling gasoline that raced across the pavement, right under the bus. Sparks flew, and then flames. The fire erupted so fast it was like an explosion. Within seconds, both vehicles were engulfed. Plastic fittings inside the bus melted. Smoke thickened the air, and the searing heat trapped passengers where they sat. Out of 50 souls on that bus, only 8 would make it out alive. Somehow, the bus driver managed to react in those crucial moments. Seeing the disaster unfold, he opened the emergency exits before the inferno consumed everything. It was enough to save a few lives, but for most it was too late. Jean-Claude Leonard, 73, was among the lucky few. He and his wife, Josette, had just fastened their seatbelts when the crash came. The fire spread, he said, like lightning. Desperate, he unbuckled them both and dragged Josette toward a fire exit. They tumbled out into the chaos, only to see friends and neighbors trapped inside, screaming for help. Without thinking, Jean-Claude ran back, flames licking at his clothes. He and another driver pulled 2 passengers from the wreckage before the fire's fury forced them back. The bus tires exploded. Windows shattered. The entire vehicle became a blazing tomb. When it was over, 41 people lay dead inside the bus. Many never even had a chance to stand. Emergency hammers were there, but panic, smoke, and the speed of the fire made them useless. Some passengers couldn't reach them. Some didn't know they were there. In the end, the fire was so ferocious that both the bus and the truck were reduced to blackened skeletons. Smoke from the wreck could be seen for miles. Cyril Alexander and his little boy never made it out of the truck. In total, 43 lives were lost that morning, marking France's deadliest road disaster in over 3 decades. The scene that followed was haunting. Firefighters, helicopters, emergency crews, all arrived to a landscape of devastation. Families waited for news that would break their hearts. Identifying the victims took weeks. The fire had been that cruel. It was the kind of stunt that Nishu Deshwal had performed countless times before, the kind that had brought him millions of views and a loyal fan base. But this time was different. This time something went horribly wrong. In an instant, Nishu's life, dedicated to creating thrilling and dangerous content for his millions of followers, came to a tragic end. Nishu Deshwal wasn't just another social media influencer. With more than 1.5 million YouTube subscribers and 1.3 million Instagram followers, he had built an online empire that thrived on adrenaline. His content wasn't about pranks or comedy. Nishu specialized in high-risk stunts involving large, heavy vehicles on treacherous terrain. His daring feats captivated audiences around the world, racking up over 300 million views. One of his most popular videos alone had drawn in 25 million views. But that fame came with a price, a growing appetite for danger that eventually proved fatal. Nishu's stunts often featured massive tractors, which he would maneuver across unstable ground, balancing them on 2 wheels or attempting complex tricks that defied belief. For 3 years, fans watched in amazement as he pushed both the machines and his own skills to their limits. But on that fateful Wednesday, the danger became all too real. That day, Nishu attempted one of his signature moves, lifting the front wheels of a heavy tractor into the air and balancing it on its rear wheels. But the ground beneath him was loose and treacherous, adding another layer of risk. Though he had pulled off similar feats before, this time the rear wheels lost grip on the unstable soil. The tractor tipped dangerously backward, teetering for a moment before flipping over completely. In seconds, the full weight of the machine came crashing down, trapping Nishu beneath its metal frame. His friends, who had been filming the stunt, could only watch in horror as the tragedy unfolded before their eyes. The loss sent shockwaves through his fan base and the wider community. Nishu was just 22 years old, a young man with a wife and a 6-month-old baby left behind. Although his audience was used to watching him walk the razor's edge of danger, few believed the risks would ever catch up with him in such a devastating way. As fans mourned his death, questions began to swirl. Many pointed to potential mechanical failures. Some speculated that the tractor's rollover protection system, designed to save lives in just such an event, had failed completely. Others suggested aftermarket modifications may have been to blame, or that tractors simply weren't built for the kinds of stunts Nishu attempted. The combination of unstable terrain, weight imbalance, and the immense strain on the vehicle created the perfect conditions for disaster. What happened that day on the riverbank in Panipat was the tragic result of years spent chasing online fame through ever more dangerous feats. Nishu Deshwal's death stands as a grim reminder of how high the cost can be when entertainment crosses into life-threatening territory. It was a bright afternoon, August 4th, 2022, in Windsor Hills, Los Angeles. The clock had just passed 1:30 p.m. The intersection at La Brea and Slauson bustled with cars, buses, and people. Among them was 23-year-old Ashery Ryan behind the wheel of her silver Jaguar. She wasn't alone. Beside her sat her boyfriend, 24-year-old Reynold Lester. In the back, their 11-month-old son Alonzo cooed softly. And Ashery was pregnant again, eager to meet the baby boy they had already named Armani. They were on their way to a prenatal appointment. Out of nowhere, tearing through the street like a missile, came a black Mercedes-Benz. Witnesses barely had time to register what they were seeing before disaster struck. Behind the wheel was 37-year-old Nicole Lorraine Linton, a traveling nurse from Texas. She wasn't slowing down. She wasn't braking. Her car was moving at 130 miles per hour on a road with a 35 miles per hour limit. And the light had been red for 15 seconds. What happened next was captured by surveillance footage too horrific to forget. Nicole's car blasted through the intersection and slammed into Ashery's Jaguar with such brutal force that the car was torn in half. The impact set off a fiery chain reaction. Flames erupted, spreading across the intersection, swallowing car after car. 9 vehicles were caught in the hellish blaze. The roar of the fire, the explosion of gas tanks, the shattering of glass. It was chaos. One witness said it was as if a black cloud had swallowed the intersection. Another described the sound, like a bomb going off. Ashery, Reynold, little Alonzo, and baby Armani, not yet born. They died instantly, gone in the blink of an eye. 2 more lives were lost that day. 43-year-old Nathsha Lewis and 38-year-old Lynette Noble. Women who'd simply been on their way to the mall, their ordinary plans ending in unthinkable tragedy. In less than 5 seconds, 6 lives were stolen. And Nicole? She survived. Bruised, burned, but alive. First responders pulled her from the wreckage and placed her in handcuffs at the scene. She's been behind bars ever since. The charges? 6 counts of murder. 6 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter. If convicted, she could spend the rest of her life in prison. As investigators pieced together what happened, chilling details emerged. Data from Nicole's car showed she had floored the gas pedal for 5 full seconds before impact, pushing from 122 miles per hour to 130 miles per hour at the moment she struck. The road had curves. She was steering, not unconscious, not frozen. Prosecutors argued she knew what she was doing, or at least enough to have stopped. Nicole's defense told another story. They claimed she suffered a sudden medical episode, something that made her disconnect from reality, that she wasn't truly in control. But the questions kept piling up. Why had she searched online just days before? Can you see your death coming? Why had she called her sister 4 minutes before the crash, anxious and rambling, sounding lost? Her family spoke out. Nicole's sister described a kind woman battling inner demons, a nurse dedicated to helping others, yet fighting a long, painful struggle with mental illness. But for the victims' families, none of that could explain away the devastation. None of it could bring back what was lost. A year later, on August 4th, 2023, the community gathered at the spot where the lives were stolen. The Slauson 6 Memorial was unveiled. Flowers, a bench, a small garden. Photos of the victims, including an ultrasound of tiny Armani, were placed with care. 6 doves were released, 1 for each soul lost in that blaze. And as the doves flew, those left behind asked the same question. How could this have happened?
Here's Jason and Melissa Dunham and their kids, 15-year-old Renee, 12-year-old Amber, and 9-year-old Evan, are gone.
It was August in Uniontown, Ohio. The Dunhams were a family like any other, or so it seemed. Jason, 46, worked in sales and business development. Melissa, 42, was a respected accountant at Bober Markey Fedorovich, BMF for short, recently promoted to partner. Their children, Renee, 15, Amber, 12, and Evan, just 9, were bright, involved, and beloved in their schools. Melissa, a woman known for her reliability and dedication, didn't show up to work one morning. Not for 1 day, not for 2. It was unlike her, unthinkable. Colleagues at BMF immediately felt something was wrong. This wasn't just someone missing a few meetings. This was a woman who had built her life on commitment. Around the same time, all 3 Dunham children stopped showing up at school. Teachers noticed. Classmates whispered. Renee, a key member of the school band, missed a major rehearsal. The absence was deafening. It was Melissa's co-worker in the school district who made the call. That evening, Uniontown police arrived at the Dunham residence on Carnation Avenue. The house looked perfectly still, undisturbed. Cars parked as usual in the driveway, mail quietly piling up on the porch, a front yard untouched, a life paused mid-sentence. Officers knocked. No answer. They knocked again. Something was wrong. With the help of a concerned neighbor, officers entered the home. What they found inside stopped them cold. Each family member lay in their bedroom, still, lifeless. All had suffered gunshot wounds. Jason was found with what appeared to be a self-inflicted wound, the weapon nearby. In one horrifying moment, the image of a loving family had been torn apart. Police suspected he had turned the gun on his wife and children, then himself. But why? There were no cries for help before that night. No police calls, no accusations, no public arguments. The Dunhams had always seemed normal, good neighbors. Melissa was thriving at work and deeply active in her daughters' lives through Girl Scouts. Renee, talented and kind, was a shining light in her school's band. Amber, full of curiosity, followed close behind. And Evan, just 9. He loved playing outside, riding bikes, chasing fireflies in the summer dusk, and now they were gone. Uniontown Police Chief Michael Batchick, after 23 years in law enforcement, called it the most disturbing scene he had ever witnessed. This was not just another case. This was a rupture, a wound torn open in the middle of a town that never expected to bleed like this. The investigation quickly shifted focus. Was this the result of a domestic conflict, a mental health crisis? But no answers came. Jason? Some friends admitted quietly that he could be controlling, but no one had imagined this. No one. Their neighbors, Edmund and Denise Gazdak, were devastated. For nearly 20 years, they had watched the Dunham children grow. Their grandchildren had played baseball with them in the yard. Laughter and summer breeze used to echo between the houses. Edmund recalled one particular summer night, a pickup game in the backyard, kids shouting, parents chatting, a perfect moment. Now, that memory felt like a haunting. The loss rippled out like a shockwave. The local school district acted fast, providing counselors and grief support. Superintendent Kevin Tobin spoke of the deep emotional toll, especially for Renee's bandmates. Just 2 years ago, the school had lost another student musician, and now this, a second blow. The halls that once carried music now carried sorrow. In the days that followed, the community gathered for a vigil at Hartville Memorial Park. People came with questions but left with none answered. How could a tragedy so enormous come from a family so ordinary? Could anything have stopped it? Was there something they all missed?
The online community was struck by tragedy in July 2019 when Grant Thompson, the star and creator of the popular YouTube channel, The King of Random, lost his life in a baffling accident. At 38 years old, Thompson was known for his inventive and often daring content, blending science experiments with creative hands-on projects. His death shocked millions of fans who had grown to admire his curiosity, enthusiasm, and adventurous spirit. Grant Thompson's journey to viral fame began in an unexpected place. Born in 1980, he worked as a commercial airline pilot in Farmington, Utah, but at 29, his fascination with understanding how things worked began to grow. In his spare time, he tinkered with random household objects, exploring basic scientific principles through playful experiments. What started as a hobby soon caught the attention of his friends and family, who encouraged him to document and share his experiments online. In January 2010, Thompson launched his YouTube channel. At first, it was just a side project, but by 2011, he was dedicating more energy to creating videos focused on life hacks, DIY projects, and science experiments. A friend had jokingly called him the King of Random, a nickname that would become the identity of his brand. By 2012, the King of Random channel was steadily gaining momentum. Viewers were drawn to Thompson's mix of practical innovation and fun science. His relatable explanations and infectious energy turned his channel into a go-to destination for those curious about how everyday things worked. Over the years, the channel grew to more than 11 million subscribers and racked up over 2.5 billion views. His videos covered a wide range of quirky experiments and hands-on projects, from making homemade fireworks to testing the strength of duct tape. His creative approach to science captured the imaginations of viewers across the globe. Thompson's work sometimes put him at odds with local authorities in Utah, especially when his experiments involved large quantities of materials or backyard tests that drew complaints. But these challenges never dampened his passion for discovery. By 2019, he had become a well-known figure in the YouTube community, inspiring millions while staying deeply committed to his family, including his wife and 4 sons. In the months before his death, Thompson had begun to scale back his involvement with the channel so he could spend more time with his loved ones. But his adventurous spirit never left him. On July 29, 2019, Thompson set out on a paragliding trip near Sand Hollow State Park in Hurricane, Utah. He had only taken up paragliding about 5 months earlier, drawn to the thrill that matched the daring nature of his career. When he failed to return home that evening, his family alerted authorities. A search began, and officials tracked Thompson's GPS device to his last known location. Eventually, rescuers made a heartbreaking discovery. They found Thompson's body along with his paragliding equipment in a rugged, isolated part of the park. A medical helicopter was sent to recover his remains. Video footage from his own recording device revealed the moments before the fatal accident. Investigators determined that a sudden change in wind caused an updraft that collapsed his parachute. Thompson tried to deploy his reserve chute, but at about 100 feet from the ground, there wasn't enough time for it to open fully. He died on impact just 4 seconds after the malfunction began. The day after his death, his team posted a tribute video titled Grant Thompson, in memoriam on his channel, honoring the man who had inspired a global community with his passion for curiosity, learning, and exploration.